This is the Lockpicker 1969, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to this next episode of Interview with a Lockpicker. Today's guest is MGSecure. Say hi.
Hi, everybody.
So, where are you from exactly?
So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, on the East Coast of the U.S., and I live now in New York City, and have for on and off for 27, 28 years.
Okay. So, how and when did you get into locksport?
I first started dabbling in it about 5 years ago. I was reading a book called A Burglar's Guide to the City. The author is Jeff Manaugh. And it's not really a guide for burglars, much to my disappointment. Um, but it's an architecture book. And one of the main themes throughout it is about how burglars, in one case, um, don't use buildings and architecture properly. So they would never dream of going in the front door to rob a bank. They're tunneling underneath it, or they're burrowing through from the building next door, or they're coming in through a skylight or a ventilation duct. And it's a fascinating book with a great history of sort of robbery and burglary and safe cracking and heists. Uh, a lot of current stuff with the LAPD about how the LAPD uses their helicopter force to prevent burglaries. But there's a whole chapter on lockpicking, in which the author spends time with Deb Alam and goes with him to a lock museum here in New York, and just is talking about locks in a similar way that he talks about architecture, that they are these devices, these little machines that are built to be used in a specific way. Um, and then there are people who don't use it that way. And Locksport for me is a lot about that of who would dream of using the key to open a lock. More you're understanding the architecture of this device and learning to manipulate it from the outside, and in this case, without being able to see what's going on. And so reading about that made me get on Amazon and buy the infamous Goso kit with the clear acrylic lock. And I dabbled with it for a bit. Not got I didn't get super serious into it for a while, but it was still, it was magical. You could, what did I know? But turns out you can open a lock. If it's a clear acrylic lock, you can open it really, really easily, um, and disturbingly easy to do. But that was kind of the moment that got me hooked. And then, it was some years later before I was able to kind of take it more seriously.
Okay. Um, so, you started out with a GoSo kit. I'm assuming you upgraded since then.
Yes, significantly. Yeah, so once I started taking it more seriously and started, in those days, I was more on YouTube with Bosnian Bill and watching some lockpicking lawyer stuff. And I wasn't on Reddit, so I didn't know about the belt system. And so what did was I built up a pretty big collection of kick cylinders and rim cylinders and mortise cylinders and residential locks. And with that, once I sort of started amassing those, I picked up my first real set was the Vorax kit from Sparrows,
Okay.
which everybody said and says, like, don't buy a big set. You're not going to use all the stuff in the set.
The
It's got a million,
the fluff.
rakes you'll never use.
Yep.
But I like the gear.
Hmm.
And so I ignored all that advice and I bought the big set with all the useless rakes that I've never touched. Um, but I like the gear, and so it was really interesting to see the range of picks that they had, the hooks, even the rakes that come with it. I don't use rakes now, but at the beginning, the part of that magic is like, oh, I can rake open a lock.
Hmm.
in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
How's that possible? So, since then, I own picks from, I think, yeah, pretty much every major manufacturer and some of the minor ones, because I find them fascinating,
Yeah.
and with the design background, the differences in approaches to the profiles and the handles and the experience, is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I have to agree. I've purchased a number of different sets from different manufacturers, probably, I don't know, 10 different manufacturers at this point, and just found little things I like about different ones. Some that I didn't really care for at all, but still learned something about them. And, that's just kind of what I'm about, is sharing what I find out about things.
Yeah, yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit about your involvement in the community and how you feel about the community.
Absolutely. I feel great about the community first and foremost. Anybody who's been either online or offline in communities around other hobbies, um, they're not always supportive,
Oh,
or
yeah,
purely supportive.
definitely. Yeah.
They can get nasty. They can get very competitive. And my experience with the community in Locksport has been the exact opposite,
Yes, me too.
and it has been so fantastic, from the very beginning of sort of dipping my toe in the waters on Reddit and Discord. Um, Everybody has been just incredibly supportive and encouraging.
Yep.
Even the YouTube videos that I've watched, people like Bosnian Bill were sharing this thing that they were passionate about and knowledgeable about.
Hmm.
And that's really, really enticing to me. And so as I've gotten slowly better at things, I've tried to do everything I can to sort of to pay that back, to encourage people, to keep trying and to try harder things and to be learning and share the stuff that I've learned.
Yeah, I will make an observation about the difference between the lockpicking community and other online communities. No trolls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trolls are dealt with very severely and gotten rid of, for a lack of a better way of saying it, I guess. So, within the community, though, you mentioned working on LockWiki. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. The So for folks who don't know LockWiki, it's lockwiki.com. And it is, as the name implies, trying to be a Wikipedia dedicated to detailed information about locks. It is not it is not an encyclopedic reference of every lock ever made. Rather, it's focused on locks where there is detailed information, um, verified, and referenced information. So I, as a photographer in another life, started taking all these pictures of locks, and LockWiki seemed like a really natural outlet for those. So I started working with the folks over there, namely Holly, who's essentially the editor in chief. And at first, it was just contributing photos to locks that there were already articles on. And then, with her sort of guidance and encouragement, I started writing lock articles myself on particularly some of the dimple locks and sort of more arcane Japanese locks, that I was picking, and it's been really great to help sort of build this community resource.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. I mean, that seems like a pretty large undertaking, with as many different locks as there are out there. What inspired your group of people that are working on this to take this on?
I wasn't so on LockWiki. I wasn't there at the beginning of it. It's been around for quite a long time. Datagram is the one who sort of runs it overall. But I think, it's the people that I've interacted with who are contributing, whether it's photos or articles or suggestions. it's all people who are in a similar boat of having gotten a lot out of the community, having learned a lot, having access to sort of locks and information about locks that we all think would be good to share with people.
Okay. So you spoke about the LPU as part of your talking about the community. So you're a black belt, correct?
Recently so.
Okay. What Dan are you at this point? Or are you just starting?
I'm
Because
in. I'm still in Dan one.
okay,
I have not been picking a ton of locks recently. Just been busy with other things. Just like I with the belt progression itself, I wasn't racing through it, and I don't see myself racing through the Dans either. But I like picking new locks, and so I'll slowly build up the points that it takes to get from black belt Dan one to two,
okay,
etc.
all right. So, what was your journey like getting to black belt?
Well, I think I started like a lot of people and sort of going through the belts. I, I had, it took me a while to get used to padlocks, having spent so much time on residential locks. But I sort of got used to that and got used to working in a vise, not in hand. And so, sort of starting about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, is when I sort of became serious about right going through the belts and getting each lock and then doing the requirements and the video. And I got to blue, and I loved the challenge locks, and making challenge locks was really rewarding for me, and I'm
Hmm.
super interesting. And so when I got to blue, at the time, the American 1100 was still a blue level lock.
Yep. Me.
And so I I got there and I took a little bit of a break for a variety of reasons. Sometimes, life gets in the way. But I came back about a year ago and started in on dimple locks.
Okay.
Having taken such a long break, it seemed like a good idea to just do something brand new rather than try to kind of reignite something from the past.
Yep.
Um, so from purple onwards, all of the locks I've been picking have been dimple locks.
Okay. So along the way, pursuing your belts, you did probably what most people are doing when they're pursuing them. You go through that list of all the different locks that are good for different belts. So, at some point, what inspired you and who you were involved with for coming up with the LPU Explorer?
Uh, yeah, the LPU Explorer, which is a very new tool, and sort of just officially went live today as we're recording this, is just for a few people who may not know yet, is an interactive tool for exploring the belt list. Um, it's searchable, it's filterable, you can filter by model, but it has a ton of other information. For instance, each lock is identified by locking mechanism, so it's really easy just to look at the dimple locks. And that was one of the struggles when I was thinking about dimple locks, and I'm here in the US, there aren't that many of them. So I spent endless hours back and forth between the belt list and Google and trying to figure out, well, which ones are dimple locks and which ones can I get somehow here in the US.
Yep.
So this tool it's a much richer way of exploring the different options in the belt lists, and it's a real collaborative effort. I I consider myself to have been a sort of somewhat minor participant in it, to be honest, but the core team, folks like Nixt, and Peace Weapon and the Greenish One, who are all on Discord and Reddit. We really came together with different areas of expertise. Nixt did all of the development and programming, and we built this tool that even when it was in its early stages, I started using anytime I had to do anything with the list.
Cool. So,
Yeah, it's a cool application that I hope people will check out. It's at lpubelts.com.
okay, we'll put the link.
Um,
We'll put the link in the description for this video as well.
Great, great.
And so, what kind of challenges did you guys run into along the way that, or at least that you're aware of?
You know, in a lot of ways, it was surprisingly easy, because the attitude in the community is so positive and open to new solutions. Um, the obviously developing an interactive application is not easy, and we were fortunate. Nixt is really, really good at what he does, and that made it incredibly more enjoyable. Um, but as anyone who's tried to talk locks, and especially complicated locks knows, there's not always consensus on what we call those little pins that are on the side. Are they finger pins? Are they side pins? Are they
Yep.
sliders? So some of the nomenclature took a while to develop. But again, I wouldn't, that was challenging, but not difficult because people were so open to the conversation.
Okay. I wanted to go back to something you talked about earlier, that your interest in challenge locks, and was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, all along from the first days when I was sort of playing with residential locks and gutting them and repinning them, um, that was how I learned how security pins worked. The first time you put a security pin in a lock and have to move the follower away from it and push it up into into the Bible, you instantly understand security pins.
Yep.
And so the sort of making the challenge locks for the blue belt requirement was just taking that a whole other step,
Yeah.
and really, you know, starting to think about the tiny details of, well, which pins am I going to make depending on the height of the key pin, how am I interacting with the shear line, and what are different technologies that I'm not going to find in an average everyday lock or a lock,
Yep.
that I can make and create sort of a challenge for myself, and then obviously for other people I share the locks with.
I I really believe that challenge lock makers have definitely a channel to let their inner evil out.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. I take some pride in having done that successfully,
I
actually.
I put together a T-shirt design for the Locksport stuff. It's challenge lock, evil genius, and mad scientist. So
You'll have to send me one.
there
For
you go.
sure.
So what what did you do? What do you do for a living?
I do design and consulting broadly in sort of interactive and e-commerce,
Okay.
what's called user experience, sort of everything sort of start to finish. Um, and I've worked in large corporations, agencies. I'm currently consulting with a number of startups. It's I tend to filter most of things in life down to problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
So just like a lock is a little machine that has to be
It's
solved.
a puzzle.
Yeah. So is communication, whether that's a visual communication or the experience somebody has on a website. Um, somebody's trying to do something, and in terms of design, I can help make that possible.
Okay. Um, okay. So before we wrap up, I had one more question for you. And what you told me about something that you did before you got into interactive design. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, so I was a photographer, um, both doing commercial work, but also involved in the art world. I was getting my MFA, my Master of Fine Arts, in Chicago at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, as and this dates me as being pretty old, but as the World Wide Web was really
Yeah.
starting to happen. And so I was still working and as a photographer and I was showing, um, but I was fascinated by the technology.
Hmm.
Digital photography was sort of just getting going in a
Yeah.
serious way. And so I started working on interactive projects at first with other artists and galleries. And then, you know, one thing led to another, and I found myself getting more and more work, doing website design and
Hmm.
concepts, and execution. And so slowly, I changed my focus over there, and so I've been sort of working in that ever since.
Well, if it lets you off a hook a little bit, I date back to when bulletin board systems were a thing and coupler modems were still in use. I ran a few of
I,
them myself, so.
yep, I go back that far as well.
Oh, okay. So, is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would reiterate how amazing the community is,
Hmm.
and how grateful I want to tell people, a lot of people, how grateful I am for their help and their encouragement. Whether that's, advice on Discord, or it's videos that they put up on YouTube, or just somebody saying good job when I open a lock.
Yeah,
And, you know, I'm so grateful for that, that I want to encourage everybody else to participate in the way that makes sense for them.
yeah,
And not everybody's going to be giving advice in Discord. Not everybody's going to be making videos for YouTube. But the little things like congratulating somebody on Reddit when they open their first white belt lock, makes a huge difference.
yeah. It
And so I
does.
guess if I was going to
It certainly
say
does.
one thing in closing, it would be, you know, everybody do what you can to make those little differences for people.
Yeah. You know what? What is it? The saying, a smile can make the biggest difference in someone's day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. It's been great to be able to get to talk to you and get to know you. I've enjoyed it a lot. I appreciate your doing this interview as well.
Thanks so much. Me too. Me too. Very
Right.
enjoyable.
And with that, we'll wrap this one up. If you are currently a subscriber, thank you. If you are not yet a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. Hit like on this video. Turn on notifications and all so you can be made aware of new content like this, including the interviews, giveaways, the drawings for the giveaways, and my other content. And with that, thank you for listening.